Hello, how's everyone doing today? Good. I see smiles, so good. That's great. And we're at California, right? Excellent. Well, welcome to the virtual national finals. My name is Jocelyn Broman. I am a We the People alumni, and I competed back in 2006. So it seems like several lifetimes ago. I am an attorney also, and then I also currently work on Capitol Hill for Representative Don Young of Alaska.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Gessner. I'm a civil rights attorney in Lexington, South Carolina. This is my first year judging a national level competition, though I've been judging the state competition here for about 12 or 13 years. I'm excited to be here, and I look forward to your presentation. Good luck.
And I am Francine Engel. I am a political scientist and I focus on American constitutional development. I also work with the Maryland Council for Civic and History Education.
And so that's us. And so if you can introduce yourselves and mention your teacher as well.
Of course. We're so excited to have this conversation with you all today. We are Irvington High School's Unit 3. I am Jade Wang.
I'm Delisha Kumar.
And I'm Jonathan Wu, and we would just like to thank the judges, the timekeeper, and our coach, Mr. Martinez, for their time here today.
Excellent. Thank you. And you all know what question we're doing today, but I'm going to read it anyway for the benefit of everyone. Also, because I love this question. John Adams wrote, "There is nothing I dread so much as a division of the Republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and in opposition to each other. What issues led to the formation of the original political parties? To what extent have these issues persisted in American political parties? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of unified or divided government?" You may begin when ready.
In 1827, Martin Van Buren wrote, "We must always have party distinctions. Party attachment in former times furnished an antidote for sectional prejudices by producing counteracting feelings. The first party system in the United States formed during times of increasing political polarization along the lines of regional and class distinctions."
The first political parties were designed to unify distinct interest groups that were geographically separated. These new political associations transcended distances by building broad coalitions of voters with converging interests from across America. The Federalist Party united wealthy craftsmen, merchants, and financiers who supported the expansion of the central government to levy protective tariffs, establish a national banking system, and reestablish strong economic ties with Britain.
The Democratic Republican Party formed to oppose the Federalists' growing influence. They united Northern farmers, Southern planters, and other common folk who opposed tariffs, distrusted central banking, and feared British influence would help concentrate wealth in the North and power in the central government.
Issues of political polarization along the lines of regional and class distinction have persisted throughout American history. Thus, the two-party system established during the early decades of the Republic persists today. These parties have continued uniting coalitions of regional and economic interest groups in common political association.
During the late antebellum period, the Republican Party united disaffected Whigs, Northern laborers, and abolitionists, all who opposed the expansion of slavery out of the South. During the industrial period, the populist, progressive, and Democratic parties united Northern and Western farmers, Southern sharecroppers, and industrial laborers, all who had been marginalized by unfettered capitalism, which had perpetuated coercive economic arrangements.
In the 1960s, the Democratic Party built a coalition of white liberals and Black Americans to oppose Jim Crow and advance Great Society programs. In the 1980s, the Republican Party built a coalition of corporate elites, neoconservatives, and Christian evangelicals in opposition to inefficiencies of the modern welfare state and perceived cultural attacks on traditional American values. In 2016, Donald Trump built a coalition of traditional Republican voters and disillusioned blue-collar workers from northern Rust Belt states that historically voted Democratic.
Today, partisanship has significantly strained the party system. The information revolution has widened regional and economic divisions in the United States, amplifying hyperpolarization. Media has created filter bubbles and echo chambers, perpetuating what James Madison called in Federalist 10 the vicious arts by which elections are too often carried, such as the 2016 Facebook Cambridge Analytica data scandal. Following the 2020 election and sustained attacks on democratic institutions throughout the Trump presidency, the future of partisanship in America remains unclear.
There are several advantages and disadvantages of a united or divided government, particularly with regard to the parliamentary system and presidential systems of governance. In parliamentary systems, the head of state is chosen from amongst the majority party within any given coalition, creating a unified legislative and executive functions. Parliamentary systems are regarded as more flexible, often allowing for rapid passage and amending of legislation so long as Parliament maintains a stable majority.
In presidential systems, governments are inherently divided because executives are chosen independently of the legislature. One advantage of such systems are set elections which promote stability. However, with fixed terms, in addition to how difficult impeachment has become, if a president acts in an impeachable manner, they will remain in power unchecked. Thank you.
All right. So what do you all think about the current unified government that we have in the United States right now, with the Democrats in control of both houses of Congress and the presidency?
One would think that a lot of policies that the Democrats have touted as their agenda would be able to be passed really quickly because of the unified government. However, due to the filibuster, a lot of the policies that Democrats want to be passed are seeming unlikely to be passed. One such example is the recent proposition of making DC a state, which is a policy that Democrats have been trying to pass for a long time. However, because a supermajority will probably be required because it's quite likely that the Republicans will filibuster this bill, it will most likely not be passed in Senate.
Additionally, we see that even though we have a Democratic legislature and presidency, we see that they often still want to compromise with Republican parties, as we saw with the COVID relief bill, where the relief bill actually decreased in the amount that was given due to compromises with the Republican Party. So this means that even with a unified government, if these legislations do get passed, in order to compromise with other political parties, we see the intentions are watered down.
Do you think the American people like divided government, or do they like unified government?
So a Pew Research study has found that in 2020, we reported the highest amount of political polarization, meaning that most people that used to identify as liberals have gone further left, and most people who used to identify as conservatives have gone further right. And with all that we've been seeing in terms of party realignment lately, which is when people start realigning the definitions and the goals of each party, it's quite clear that the parties are starting to diverge from each other, meaning that the American people seem to prefer a government that is divided so that they can get their agendas passed.
That being said, political parties can act as a buffer act as a buffer between quick changes based on popular passion. For example, Hamilton and Federalist 70 claims that political parties can having political parties can help ensure debates over nuanced policy. And so by having these political parties and an inherent divide in our government, it ensures that more voices can be heard within.
So tell me, in a democratic system of government, are political parties inevitable?
Yes, I would say that in a democratic system, that political parties are inevitable, as we saw that was the greatest fear that the founders had. But as stated in Federalist 10, Madison believes that even though these parties are inevitable, it's important to have them as a check against each other. So because there's varying groups with different interests, they can compete with one another in order to prevent a tyranny of the majority.
Okay, Do you think that the country would be more democratic and less partisan if the president and the vice president were from two different parties?
So currently the role of the vice president has not really been an active one, in which the vice president has not traditionally recommended legislation. They have mainly acted as an advisor to the president. However, in more recent times, as we've seen with Vice President Kamala Harris, she has taken a more active role because of the 50-50 split and the nature of the role that she plays in being the deciding factor. So now it's become a more political role. And because of that, we have to consider that it might lead to even more division and more faction, just because if the president and the vice president are at odds, that creates another scenario where people can start arguing. However, if we were back to the times where the vice president was looked at as a role of being an advisor, that would probably help heal a lot of the division we see today.
Additionally, before we had, I forget the exact amendment, but the amendment that states that the Electoral College places one vote for the president and one vote for the vice president. The system in place was that the candidate with the second most electoral votes would be the vice president. And so we got a presidency of Thomas Jefferson with the vice president of a federalist, a federalist president, or I'm sorry, a federalist vice president. And so we saw that they had a lot of infighting within their own branch of the government. And so it led to a lot of inefficiencies at the time.
So let's talk a little bit more about factions and parties. Are they the same thing?
Factions and parties are not the same thing. 538 identifies 5 unique factions within the Republican Party and 6 unique factions within the modern Democratic Party. And this is mostly seen if you look to how the parties are beginning to splinter today, where you had the two front runners in the primaries last year being Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders, who belonged to two very different wings, Bernie Sanders being part of the populist progressive wing and Joe Biden being part of the old progressive guard, where he's more of an establishment Democrat. And so that's just one example of how the parties themselves are perpetuating infighting, because they have grown too big-tented as they've fought in the two-party system to gain influence.
So does that mean we're going to have some more third parties in the next 10 years?
Though it would be beneficial to have third parties, I think that we have a lot of structural factors in our democratic system that prevent third parties from growing and perpetuates the two-party system. If we look to Duverger's law, he states that if we look at our system of first past the post voting, it has a causality with a two-party system that is continuing on today. So in order for third parties to come to fruition in coming years, we need to revise these structural factors first.
But we're already starting to see that. Like Alaska just instituted ranked choice voting, so shouldn't it be coming down the pike?
With the Fair Representation Act, basically this is a proposal that is being discussed in Congress right now, but basically what it would do is it would adopt the ranked choice voting system that we see in Alaska and we see in Maine, and basically it would create larger representation districts and have more representatives. So basically this would be a multi-member system, and in that multi-member system basically you would be able to rank your preferences for your representatives, and by voting for more people, this may possibly give way to more third party candidates. However, there are still structural factors. For example, look to the 5% federal funding threshold, where you require 5% of the federal vote in the previous presidential election in order for your campaign to be federally funded. And for these reasons, it's very unlikely that unless we have a lot of structural change, we'll see third parties becoming viable. Thank you so much.
All right, great job, everyone.
Fantastic. Let's recognize the students for their hard work and participation today.
Yeah, you guys did a great job. You walked us through, during your statement, you walked us through like these different time periods of different like party systems, and it was a really good discussion about how that realignment kind of happens between parties. And so I appreciate that it was a little, that you followed us through all of the history of the United States and didn't jump immediately from like founding period to like modern day. So it was a good job on that. In asking about the parties and factions, I really liked our discussion of elections, because there is this really good question of like, do we have a two-party system because this is just what's inevitable because of our system and first past the post and all of that. So I think that you guys are really have done a lot of good thinking about what does that mean in regards to possible third parties and what is the ranked choice voting could lead into. And so I really appreciated that discussion. Yeah. The only thing that I could say that could have made it better is that you did a really good job in your statement of talking about economics, foreign affairs, and centralized power as like the issues that persisted in American political parties, kind of advise it. You could have brought that in a little bit more into the follow-up to kind of talk about how that currently works and use those in more examples. But I'm getting nitpicky because it was a great presentation and we covered a lot of ground. So excellent job, everyone.
Absolutely, great work. Like my colleague says, there's a lot of ground to cover with this, and it's hard to cram it all into a 4-minute opening presentation. And then hopefully you can get the opportunity to expand on that in the follow-up questions. And I thought you did a great job. Like that you mentioned several coalitions, the 1960s, 1980s, and again, recently here in 2016 to explain how things get done, that you form those coalitions and that's how it happens. Really, the only critique I can have for you is one of our scoring categories is constitutional application. And I think for this particular question, that's very difficult because there's not a lot in the Constitution that deals with political parties. There's some things that have an effect. There's not a whole lot for you to work with, but a couple things I thought you could have hit that just a little bit harder. Otherwise, really great presentation. Good work.
Yeah, and my colleagues already have wonderful feedback for you here. Fabulous job both in your presentation and in your follow-up questions. What I really liked was when you went through in your presentation and you talked about the different coalitions and how political parties have evolved. You were very clear in terms of who was in each group and sort of what their views were, what they stood for. So I felt like from your presentation, we got a very good, that you showed that you had a very good understanding of these different political parties and different coalitions that have existed in political history. So very nice job.